All right, this is an experiment to see if this actually works. So therefore, I'm just going to go over the program. And then if I go ahead and rebuild it, it should be already finished. And then if I go ahead and run it, just to show you what the animation looks like. And it should automatically run. Okay, there we go. And if you notice then, we have a group of vehicles that could be chosen. And then I type in a vehicle, and notice it will start moving the vehicle to the right and then just down the list on the right. And this is what was desired by the assignment. And of course, then drive safely. And then you have a choice of a second one. And then if I do like van, and I'll do the same thing for a van, notice how it's now moved to the right, just like the previous one was. And then I have a third one. And if I do something I've already chosen before, notice it just comes back to the selection. And so if I do an SUV, and I'll go ahead and move the SUV into the elevator and move it down. And unfortunately, the IntelliJ does not have the automation that, well, not the clearing of the screen like normally is done if you have a regular console. But in an ID in IntelliJ console, it doesn't do that. So you have to hope everything lines up. So it makes it look like it's actually falling. Then the other thing to consider is I use a time delay. And so therefore, I have an interrupted exception is one of the required ones here, and then also the file IO exception. And even though the file IO fill array, the exception is done here, and then I go through and read in the array, fill in the first item and the second item. I put blanks so that it will be a blank display on the second column. And then print area. I go through, and if you notice, it's a simple one because I'm just printing out the first and second column. If you notice, then everything was right justified. And so I'm just giving 12 spaces for any of the names. And you can make this larger if you want. And then individual spaces in between. And I'm doing a print format, which then prints out a line. And that's what the \n is for, to make sure a new line is done. And then I'm printing out both the first column and the second column, or index 0, index 1. And then choose vehicle. Then in here, if you notice, I always have a string with 2 dimensions cars. And there are supposedly ways to do it, but I always, just from force of habit of programming from long ago, where you had to pass in this case, the number of rows. So then it just goes through and prints out and choose array. Then it goes through and does a comparison, going through the entire list to see if one of them matches the item that's been submitted for delivery, and then it goes through this, and notice if bad entry is changed to false. And so after we go through this portion, then anytime then an entry is compared, and I'm just trying to think of when that bad entry would be printed out. Let me run that again, because I think I might have made a mistake here. Okay. If I type in one bad entry, obviously an orange is not that. Okay, it does only print it out once. Okay, yep. So it's the for loop here that goes through and checks each of the items. And if it falls through with still a bad entry, then it'll print out the error message. Okay, everything's fine on that. And then on that is it will go back in and ask you to enter again. And the only way I'll get down here to print something is if you have gotten a good entry, and it goes through then and prints it out. Then, let's see, I'm trying to think of anything else. Print array is very simple. It's just going row by row, going down, printing both items. And then the fill array is also fairly simple. I just go through the file and then fill up the first item or first column of each row, and then fill in the second column with just blanks. Now, lower is an interesting one here. Now, on some systems, this will clear the console, but unfortunately on IntelliJ IDEA, which I'm using, it does not. But I left it in there in case somebody else wanted to try to use it. Then I go through, and then I set whatever in the first column. In other words, I check, and then the last item I'm passing in is the row of the vehicle I want. And so it's going to go to the row of the vehicle and then move the name into the second column or index 1, and then set the first column to blank because you've already chosen that car. And then I do a while rep as long as it's less than or equal to 9, and I just go ahead and print it out and then move it down one at a time, which is right here, and put a blank in the previous one, and then loop until I get to 9, and then I exit. And then I do a drive safely. Then I do a timeout to make sure that that is seen because I replaced the car chosen with drive safely. And then after I wait and display it, then let's see, I don't see a display. Okay, there we go. And let's see, it just printing it out twice. So I don't really need this one anymore, because then the next time through, it'll go through, and if you have any more cars to select, then it'll go back up and it'll have a blank. And so everything's blank, including the slot where that one car you just chose was located. So I hope this is helpful for you. And let's see if I go ahead and stop